Star Trek released in 2009, directed by J.J. Abrams, and it was a box office smash. It reinvigorated the dormant universe at that point, but it wasn't exactly met with universal acclaim by the fans. Some decried it was too different, it was too modern, and it was too in your face. And I'm not going to say that they were all very, very wrong. I'm not here to say that. Because when I first watched it with Dad in the cinema as well, are you seeing a theme? We had a great time. We did have a moment of like, okie dokie, right, this is what Star Trek looks like in the 2000s. And it's a film that I initially really, really enjoyed. And then I thought I didn't enjoy it for a long time. I thought it was just kind of generic sci-fi for the sake of it. And then as time and rewatches have gone by, well, let's find out what I thought about it, eh? We're gonna go through all of the ups and downs for Star Trek 2009. The first up of the week, continuing our theme with the music, goes to Michael Giacchino. He delivered a blinder. So I was sitting there in the cinema and, you know, the big title theme comes on. And my first reaction going, I miss Jerry Goldsmith. I remember that. I do remember that. And I went, okay, I miss Jerry Goldsmith, because I was so used to that score. I was so used to that theme, even though we'd had different scores throughout the franchise. And so I remember going, okay. I have worn out the soundtrack for this film several times. I've also been extremely fortunate. I've seen this film shown on a big screen with a live orchestra in front of it. It is a powerhouse score. It suits the theme and the mold of this film really, really well. With the incorporation of Alexander Courage's theme and, of course, the big reprise over the closing credits, it's fun. It's a fun score. I mean, the theme is great. For me, Spock's theme played on a musical instrument called the Eru. It's the beating heart of this film, much in a way that Spock himself is the beating heart of this film. But the way that Michael works that score through all of the action, and you've got moments like the birth of Kirk, you've got any time the Narada's on screen, the introduction of the Enterprise. This soundtrack went from, I miss Jerry Goldsmith, to one of my most re-listened to scores in the entire franchise. My next up is going to the USS Kelvin. I really, really like this design. So up to this point in the universe, we had seen single nacelle ships before, don't get me wrong. You know, for example, we had the Freedom class USS Firebrand, which, although it was on screen in The Best of Both Worlds Part 2, it was a kind of a, what's that? But, you know, we had things like the Saladin and the Hermes classes. We would get things like the Archer as well. But the Kelvin seemed like it was strong enough to deal with only one nacelle. And also, what an intro to the film. You were getting camera angles going up, down, left, right, and center, kind of showing off the fact that we have a budget for this one. And also, the choice to not veer too drastically away from the aesthetic of what had been established. We still had our saucer section, we had our nacelle. Now, our secondary hull was placed above the saucer section rather than below. Okay, that was different. Not the only time we've ever gone different. I mean, look at the Miranda class. You had your nacelle swept down underneath, you had that roll bar. You know, we've played with different styles before, but the Kelvin stands out. I do wish it had survived for a little bit longer. Speaking of surviving, poor old Captain Robot. But I want to give an up to the uniforms aboard the Kelvin. While I will admit, they're not my favorite uniforms in the franchise, I like that they incorporate the per scan device from the motion picture, but it seems like the uniform itself serves as a per scan device. We know this because when Nero shoves that spear directly through the captain's chest, we get from the on the Kelvin, we see he goes from heart rate elevated to heart rate suddenly not there anymore. But at the same time, I do want to shout out one of, I think, the most jarring things, and that's not a negative, but a jarring thing in this film is the modernization. So this is set in 2233, so before the original series, which was of course the 2260s, but long after Star Trek Enterprise. And there was a concerted decision made by director J.J. Abrams not to go with the aesthetic that was established in the 1960s. This is a conversation that would come up again when Discovery aired in 2017. The perceived massive jump in technological advances between what we saw in the 60s and what we would now see depicted, for example, here in Star Trek. I actually have a lot of sympathy for the people who were not happy that a ship was so clearly more technologically advanced than, say, the Enterprise was in the 60s, because at this point in the film, this is meant to be the same, or well, pretty much the same timeline. Obviously, the existence of the Narada changes things, but, right up until now, the Kelvin existed in the Prime universe. And it's very different. It's very clearly not the ship that would then would be 30 years old compared to the original Enterprise. I think that this was a bit of a inevitability. I think the 60s aesthetic worked really well in the 60s for an ongoing series. The obvious, kind of callback to that will be, well, what about in the Next Generation episode Relics when Scotty visits the bridge? And what about in Enterprise in A Mirror Darkly when they go aboard the Defiant? Those things were wonderful, fun standalones. They didn't have to worry about constructing an ongoing narrative based on a set that was designed back in the 60s. I am of the complete belief that if the technology that was available to us in 2007, 2008, 2009 was available to those making the show back in the 60s. Now, while design eras are design eras, I'm not saying that suddenly, we would, design something that looks like it belongs in 2025. What I am saying is the technology would reflect what was available. In the 60s, touchscreen computers were a dream of the future. Here, even in 2009, touchscreen was fairly commonplace. So you have to extrapolate from what is available to you what would then be the case several hundred years in the future. Again, as I say, this is something that came up with Discovery and Strange New Worlds, which is of course a redesigned USS Enterprise. There is a decision that needs to be made of what is honoring what came before and what makes sense for a story of the day. I do feel that for the most part, the aesthetic of the Kelvin and later the Enterprise makes sense for the technology of the day. I'll come back to the Enterprise now in a bit as well. So I guess I just wanted to do that up front to address that. And even there will be people who are not satisfied with what I'm saying, and that's fine, that's fair. There are very understandably, the Enterprise looks like it did in the 60s, and that's it. And I'm not here to say that you're wrong. There are those who say the Enterprise looked like it did in 1979 in the motion picture, and I'm not here to say that you're wrong. That is not what we're here to do. For me, the update of the Enterprise and the ships makes sense within the context of this film and the way the world looked at the time. We shall call that the Sean covering his ass rant. It's in the opening minutes of the film, the Narada is firing at the Kelvin, sad face, and one of my favorite lines reflecting the modernization of the way people talk is, it's sort of, you hear a lot of chat in the background, and then, are the shields even up? Up! Included in that, the way people kind of speak in this film compared to the rest is, when they send their findings to Starfleet respond, these findings don't make sense. Yes, that's why we sent it to you. I enjoy that. They speak, so it feels real, the dialogue in this film. We also have, very rapidly, a new captain. Captain God of Thunder himself, Chris Hemsworth as George Kirk. He gets basically next to nothing to do in this film. I mean, there's a lot going on in this scene, but what he does do makes an impact. Now, obviously, his star would skyrocket after Star Trek and, of course, becoming Thor in the Marvel films. But in this short little scene, as is effectively summarized very nicely by Captain Pike later on, he does, for someone with such little screen time, he has such a massive impact. Pausing on Kirk for a second, over on the Narada, you've got the redesigned Romulans and you've got Captain Nero. I will talk about Eric Bana in a little bit. I'm actually giving an up to the redesigned Romulans. So for me, although I really like the look of the V on the Romulans, and I really like that Picard gave us the option of V or no V, I like here that you could almost believe that the tattoos are meant as a sort of unity, that even if you don't have the genetic V, you can physically put it on yourself with the tattoos. I'm down with that. I have to say, the Romulans work for me. Nero is a bit on the nose. I will say that. Nero fiddled while Rome burned? Okay. It feels like, was it maybe a placeholder name? I will say this. Star Trek 2009 is many things, but it is not a subtle film. Well, anyway, the Narada, not being a big fan of the Kelvin, kicks 7 levels of crap out of it, leading to Kirk's heroic sacrifice. And Kirk is born in space. To say that was something that met with controversy. He's from Iowa, he just works in outer space. I remember, I think it was at the time, there was an interview with, now forgive me, I think it was Roberto Orsi, it could have been Alex Kurtzman, but basically the joke was like, hey, he said he was from Iowa, he never said he was born in Iowa. Now, Riverside, Iowa might have something to say about that, but overall, I think this scene works so well. I like the little bit of the ribbing about the name. Well, we'll name him after your father. Tiberius? No, that's the worst. Let's call him Jim. The scene really works. It's really emotional. It's really sad. You know, that music, again, big shout out to Michael. And the way it's played, hell of an opening for this film. Up. I've given a lot of ups. The Narada looks bloody stupid. I'm gonna say it. It's like they said the design of the Narada was supposed to be about function. This is about what they're gonna do. It's a sea urchin. And also, lest I even begin to discuss the complete lack of railings on the inside. For as powerful and as much of a badass baddie the Narada is, it's a bit of a silly ship. Now, my next down. I want it known that this young actor is a very nice man who was trying his best, but I'm James Tiberius Kirk. Yeah. Down. I like the run up. I like, stealing the car. I like the voiceover from the uncle. I enjoy that, driving past the brother. Doesn't look half the same without the mustache. But young Kirk's always been a rebel, so he's going to steal a car, wreck it for absolutely no reason, and then shout his full name at the cop. By way of contrast, young Spock is brilliant. Not just, as I say, this is not against the two young actors. I'm not evil. It's the construction of the scenes. We wanted Kirk to be a rebel, so that's the way we did it. We wanted Spock to be ostracized from his peers while trying to be the best that he can. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And also, this scene is so full of, Easter eggs. Obviously, Temporal Observations is a fun one this week. I like to think they're always fun, but it's a fun one this week. But this is something that would carry over as well into Discovery, for example, this aesthetic of the study pods. But children, like Vulcan children bullying, is something we had seen before in Star Trek in the animated series yesteryear. But there's something more cruel about how logical they're being about it. It so works. It's so good. And we're introduced here as well to Ben Cross as Sarek. In the same way some people will only ever see Matt Jeffries' design as the Enterprise, I struggle to see anyone but Mark Leonard as Sarek, but Ben Cross and later James Frain both deliver, I think, great Sareks in their own right. Ben Cross gets the least to do, because he's only in this film. I like what he does with it. It's detached, but it's not. It's a hard role to play. Sarek always was a hard role to play. And as he speaks to Spock, explaining that, as the ambassador to Earth, it seemed only logical that I would marry a human woman. I both believe him and I don't, and I think that's a testament to how he plays the role. Also, the design of Vulcan in this film. There is massive benefits to the Star Trek universe that came from the budget increase for this film. Up to the casting of Zachary Quinto as Spock. I just think it was perfect casting. Absolutely perfect casting. In an interview with Trek Movie, Leonard Nimoy spoke ahead of the film's release to say that he didn't have approval on the casting, but he was consulted on the casting. And he thought that Quinto was just the perfect choice. And I think that this film and Into Darkness and Beyond only confirm that. There are things that I'm not thrilled about with what they do with Spock in these films, but the performance is not the issue in any way. Like sassy Spock turning down the Vulcan Science Academy. I've never heard someone throw so much like into live long and prosper. Brilliant. Brilliant. Go off, Queen. Slay. Over on Earth, in Iowa of all places, we get Zoe Saldana as Uhura. Look, you're going to hear me talk about how much I like the casting of this film a lot during this film, so yay! She's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. At this point in history, Uhura was a fantastic character in Star Trek history. Nichelle Nichols remains one of the most influential and inspirational performers in Hollywood, in my humble opinion. When it comes to how Uhura was used, often they were hamstrung by the restrictions in place in the 60s. This is something we've talked about so much on this channel. And then as the movies go on, there are movies where she's used better than others. I really, really, really appreciate the decision to bump her up to effectively main character status in particularly Trek 09. I think that she always was one of the most interesting characters in the original series cast. Now in the 60s you had your big three. It was Kirk, Spock, McCoy. That's the way they did it in the original series. There was Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and then there was everybody else. That gets a bit better in the movies. It's still there, but the balance is still a bit better. You don't have that here in these films. If anything, you've Kirk, Spock, Uhura, and then you've got everybody else. If we've got to have a big three, I think they made the right choice. As we're walking through this scene, and by the way, shout out to Paul Sutherland, who is of course a friend of mine who's been a long-time contributor to the channel. You can see the side of his head in this scene. Hi Paul. We walk through and we get that great scene where she's ordering drinks and we get the introduction of Chris Pine. William Shatner is not in this film. There was very, very, very initial provisional plans that Shatner might be in this film. If he was going to be, it was possibly going to be a sort of a, and it was going to be a holographic message. It was going to be during the scene where the two Spocks meet at the end. I think the film works without him. News reports at the time said that he was furious with his lack of inclusion. Nimoy debunked that and said that while he was, he wasn't exactly thrilled that he wasn't in the film, he wasn't tearing around the room like a bull in a china shop either. And, they all agreed Kirk had died in generations, so there was going to have to be a little bit of finagling to make William Shatner's appearance work in this film. Which is my preamble to Chris Pine, I think does a fantastic performance anyway, while incorporating some Shatner-isms without doing a parody or even satire of Shatner's Kirk. This is Pine's Kirk. I do have issues with how he's written, but in the 3 films, obviously I'll talk about the others in the coming weeks, but all 3, you see an evolution in him, that we go from the hick farm boy, where we get in this scene, where suddenly he's fighting Cupcake, just sort of because he can, to a genuine leader. Oh God, I genuinely want a 4th Star Trek film. I do. I do. Anyway, right, let's go on with this film. You know how it goes. He flirts with Uhura. She's having none of it. We get the whole joke about she's got no first name. Big bar fight, and then he is put down. Hey, by the way, I see you, Matt Jennings. We've been very lucky with some of the people that we've got to meet. Like, Matt's lovely. Matt's my buddy. Matt took me and Chris out to the Vasquez Rocks. That's what a legend he is. Up for Matt. Also, Bruce Greenwood's Pike. Now, let me set the scene. Picture it. Hollywood, 2009, you're making a Star Trek film. You want to put Captain Pike in there. Now remember, in 2009, we had seen him in The Cage, played by Jeffrey Hunter. We had seen him again in The Menagerie, played first by Sean Kenny in The Chair, and then via archive footage by Jeffrey Hunter. After that, he had only been referenced in dialogue, and that's since 1966. So Bruce Greenwood he both did and didn't have carte blanche, but we didn't know Pike at this stage the way we now know Pike via Discovery and Strange New Worlds. I think he delivered someone who is commanding, he is impressive, he is inspiring, he is... Look, if it's not clear, I'm a fan of Bruce Greenwood. And they didn't have to include Pike. I mean, that's it. I mean, like, we who are canon focused, we are very, very glad that they did include Pike. You know, Pike commanded the Enterprise. Pike didn't launch the Enterprise. That was April. So, you know, they did take some canonic liberties in this film. Okay, they took quite a few canonic liberties in this film. But they could have gone with another character altogether. They didn't have to do what they did. And they made him Pike. And the film is stronger because of it. I know in the original series, which has also become a bit of a canon head scratcher with Strange New Worlds, Kirk says that, I met him when he became fleet commander, and they've sort of gone with that for Strange New Worlds, although I love that. What the hell are you doing on my ship? Meme that's going around. Here, Pike is much more of a mentor to Kirk. And thematically, I just like the idea of the former commander of the Enterprise being the mentor to the next commander of the Enterprise. And then we get that speech about, your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes and he saved 800 lives. It was a great line for the traitor, and it just works. Also, shout out for the Kelvin salt shaker. This Kirk is a bit over it. We don't really get more than his dad died, and his mum struggled to raise him, living with his extended family in Iowa, bit of a wild child, and now apparently genus level intellect. The backstory's thin, so I'm glad we don't dwell too long on it. Basically overnight, Kirk goes from this hellion tearaway to, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go to Starfleet Academy. I'm glad we don't dwell too much on it, because we know, you have to get people in certain places. You've got to get Kirk on the Enterprise. Works for me. Rocking up and seeing the Enterprise being built on the ground. Oh, that's pretty. There you go. That's my professional opinion. That's pretty. Carl Urban as McCoy. So he was a Trekkie, is a Trekkie. And his McCoy is one of the funniest things in this film. It veers a lot closer to parody, I think, than, say, straight performance in Trek 09. But it works. It's a hard line to walk, and not everyone does it well. I think he does it well. It's definitely a bit more of a, come on, let's get the catchphrases in there. We got Bones here and this. We get that great speech about, darkness, death, and silence, and disease, and everything. It's like, all right, grand, you don't like space, I get it. and you can't help instantly liking the character. Go to rapid scenes then. Okay, you've got the Narada, the jellyfish arrives, you've got that Kirk. Okay. Down pretty much everything to do with Kirk and Gala. Gala's fun. I think she's great. But she is such a plot along. And there's also a deleted scene, which I'm very happy they took out, which is Kirk tricking her into introducing the virus into the Kobayashi Maru. Look, on the one hand, you could say the film needed an explanation as to how he circumvented the test, but it makes her much more of a patsy, and I'm really glad they took that out. There's also I'm gonna sound like such a prude. This was such a, we need something for the trailer. We need women in underwear for the trailer. So let's have this scene. Nah. You get a little bit of plot importance here when Uhura comes into the room and is telling Gala about, she picked up references to what was a lightning storm in space, 47 Klingon warbirds were destroyed, it was by Romulans, Kirk pops up, and away they go. And yeah, all right, some plot points are hit there. Massive down to how Kirk acts in the Kobayashi Maru. It's one thing, full on cheating the way that he does, that's bad enough, but everything about this is a giant middle finger to Starfleet. And that's not Kirk at the end, even with it, and I don't just mean established Kirk in canon, that isn't this Kirk. It's, haha, screw you, Starfleet, I'm just gonna mess with your test and expect to walk away completely unscathed? Down. Having Spock be the one who designed the Kobayashi Maru, yeah, right, I'm okay with that. Because it does give us this gem of a line up to Spock explaining how Kirk misunderstood the point of the test, to feel the fear of certain death. Okay. Down, how Kirk reacts. Kirk's an arsehole in this film, or at least up to this point. As much as we like where he gets to, I would flunk him out of Starfleet. He's dangerously arrogant at this point. Completely flouts the rules, completely thinks he's above everybody else. And you could argue Pike put that in his head by saying how special he was. But really, at the end of the day, he's so unlikable. So when he's placed on academic suspension, yeah, I completely agree with Admiral Barnett here. It was just, I didn't like at all how he came across. He is not an endearing, plucky, romantic lead in this. He is a dangerous asset during a crisis situation. So when we get to the hangar and everyone's being assigned to their different ships and he's not assigned to a ship, in any sort of reality, yeah, that's right. Because remember, at this point as well, the only thing he'd established himself as good at was cheating. So there was no call that we need him on any of the ships. Yeah, I think they went a bit too hard too early. They walk a fine line with Uhura, but actually I think an up to how she is so certain and, no, I'm assigned to the Enterprise. We get the hint of I won't say I got a hint of a relationship here, but they certainly know each other between Uhura and Spock here. This all works. And then you get the whole gag of McCoy is going to get Kirk on the ship. Is it a bit contrived? 100% yes. But we need him to be on the ship. So, okay. Up to the reveal of the Enterprise. It was designed as a direct homage to the motion picture. I think Ryan Church did a pretty damn good job at the redesign of the Enterprise. To this day, you will get people talking about how this hot rod Enterprise looks, why it's so big. It's bigger than a Galaxy class ship, for example. And, kind of what on earth? Does it look more functional on the outside? I don't know. The nacelles are a little bit ridiculous in my opinion. I think the neck is a bit too swept back. But a lot of my issues, I'll be honest, are aesthetic. And again, how many times have I said my favorite design of the Enterprise is the redesign from the 1979 motion picture? So I'm trying to put that aside for a second. There was an interview with Shatner back in the day, and he made the fair point. He was like, again, they didn't need to keep the overall shape of Matt Jeffries' design, and they did. And yeah, I have since grown to really appreciate the Enterprise. I will say right now, I prefer the redesign for Star Trek Beyond. I think it's a little bit more sleeker. I think it's kind of shrinking some of the proportions down a little bit helped. It is still an up to me overall, and I do like how it is treated as the cream of the cream. It is the flagship, it's the special thing. That overall does work. Even if the nacelles are a little bit ridiculous. Aboard the bridge, we get Pike in the big seat and we get up to John Cho taking over the role of Sulu from George Takei. Really like him in the part. Down, absolutely unnecessary for the experienced pilot Sulu not to realize the external inertial dampeners were on. They needed to do something to delay the Enterprise getting to Vulcan, making Sulu look like a bit of an idiot, wasn't it? Up, Anton Yelchin. God, that still hurts. I thought he was great. He's definitely, like, what they were going for with Walter Koenig in the original series was we want younger officer to appeal to the younger crowd. Well, I mean, they say Chekhov is 17 in this film. They wanted younger, they got younger. And some of the jokes, I mean, we've all, at some point in our life, done the, nuclear vessels. And so here, we have Victor, and the computer not understanding him. Okay, it's a sweet, loving little tribute. At this stage, it was a tribute just to Chekhov and Walter Koenig, and I think this is something that's aged very well with the tragedy that happened in real life. Up! Majel Barrett makes a vocal cameo in the film. The film was actually released just after she died. She died in 2008 and the film was released in 2009. The announcement of her casting came just a few days before her death. So it was just lovely that she was here in this universe, in this film as well. Because of course, much like the rest of the original series cast, she was there from the beginning. There's also a shout out to Nurse Chapel is aboard the Enterprise in this film. Now we don't see her on screen that we know of. McCoy addresses her off camera. But yeah, I like the fact that Majel's voice is in it and Chapel gets a shout out. All the kerfuffle about, we have the flea vaccine and Kirk is being rushed to sickbay. After Chekhov gives his update of the fleet having warped away to Vulcan, lightning in space, Kirk realizes, hang on, this is exactly what happened the day I was born. And so he needs to run to find Uhura. And we get it's the gag that goes on a little bit too long, get the swollen hands and the tongue, and McCoy keeps jabbing them, and it feels a bit filler, I won't lie. Basically they confirm, yes, this is the Romulans, nearly 30 years later on. And away they go up to the bridge. Kirk bursts in. Pike is not happy to see him, understandable. What the hell are you doing on the ship? Listening to Uhura is an up. The way Kirk acts with Spock is a whopper of a down. Okay, I probably could amalgamate the way Kirk acts into one down, but it's just, then you just get another scene and another scene. But yes. So, but to concentrate more on the up, listening to Uhura. You've got an officer with experience there for a reason. Listen to them. I like that about Pike. Warp is interesting in this film. It's pretty fast. Not gonna lie. These ships are a little bit faster than they were in the Prime universe. The reveal once they come out of warp, as they basically enter the starship's graveyard, that's an up. The fact that Narada was able to destroy the rest of the fleet in the few seconds between, logical down. That does not make sense. I mean, look, we knew that Narada was powerful, but it still took a while to kick the crap out of the Kelvin nearly 30 years earlier. So, Nero aboard the Narada sees the registry on board the Enterprise, the fact that it's NCC 1701, and he calls for a ceasefire. There's that. The hailing, I'm Captain Christopher Pike. Hi Christopher, I'm Nero. I love it because this is not the way adversaries address each other in Star Trek, and I really like it. And I want to give an up here, Eric Bana. We never really talk about him, do we? And I think he's bloody brilliant in this film. He doesn't get an awful lot to do, and does get a few cheesy lines, but he sells the rage of Nero. Nero is not a logical character, and that comes across in spades, but he does sell the rage of him. And straight away we see where we're going. We're going to do a repeat of Captain Robot from the Kelvin. Pike needs to come across in a shuttlecraft. You've got no choice. Pike, you know, he's basically rocking a hard place. Like, well, the Enterprise is destroyed if I don't do this, so I will sacrifice myself if needs be. However, I won't be sacrificing myself willy-nilly. He brings Kirk and Sulu and Engineer Olsen with him because they're going to drop down toward the drill, up to how blatantly obvious Engineer Olsen, the red shirt, is. Just up. Down. Kirk, you're not supposed to be here. So why did you be my first officer? What? Away off they go on the shuttle. Really like the shuttles, by the way. We get that quick sort of confirmation of Spock, who is now in command, promoting McCoy to CMO, as if McCoy didn't already know that, considering the Doctor's dead, he was on deck 6. I love the orbital dive. Is it a reference to Generations? Very possibly. Is it, hey, look what we can do in 2009? Very probably. I thought it was great, and and to be honest with you, it slapped in the trailer. It really did. It was like, this is Star Trek, but we're jumping from the stars. All right then, okay, cool. And I think most importantly for all of it, love the gag. Sorry, Olsen, you're gone. You were an idiot, soz. Fencing Sulu. Yep, that was an up from me, because we know Sulu's good at swordplay. We've seen the Naked Time. That worked, and then you get that battle with the Romulans, and I like the fact that they've carried over, as they should, because, you know, time has changed, but genetics haven't. Romulans still quite a bit stronger than humans. Not massively thrilled they destroy Vulcan, but for the plot, it's quite a powerful one. I will say, down for the red matter, because this is the MacGuffin to destroy all MacGuffins. We can create a black hole. There's a lot of black holes now. Surely that's bad. The look of the black hole, I mean, listen, we hadn't got what the official picture of a black hole looks like in 2009. So, I mean, it does the job. It's a hole in space. Sci-fi had been doing it for years before that. Grand. But yeah, poor old Vulcan. And also, poor old Winona Ryder. Aw. Amanda, aw. But as grim as this might sound, up to the scene. You know, you get Kirk and Sulu come back aboard the Enterprise. Spock beams down. He runs into the Catrick Ark, nice little nod by the way, to go and save his folks. And unfortunately, she is killed, and it's devastating. Quinto plays the hell out of it. Hey, even Yelchin, you know, he's trying to beam her up, and he loses her. And the Enterprise has to get away from what is now the black hole where Vulcan used to be. It's powerful. And Spock's captain's log, where he says, I am now a member of an endangered species. That was an up. Uhura and Spock in the turbo lift. I think it was the right time to show it. Yes, okay, right, so there's been discussion about, hang on, what? And perhaps our knowledge of Vulcan romance has deepened since then. You know, I think I remember at the time going like, is it Ponfire already? Well, no, Ponfire is when they have to do the do. They can still, I mean, Sarek and Amanda were married for years. So I do remember being this in and going, okie dokie. But I think it works. We do now have an issue. Well, Spock could probably be the first one to say we have an issue of commanding officer. But not the point of this scene. This scene that Spock is still Spock. You know, Uhura asks, what do you need? I need everyone to keep operating efficiently. Okay. Yep, that scene is an up. Between Nero and Pike on the Narada, we get Nero's motivations and his backstory. And it is a down. I believe it's a deleted scene, I believe, with the Romulan IL, who's basically our Romulan #1. And even he suggests, you know, why don't we just go home? And Pike says, Romulus is fine, Romulus is there. And we get the reveal that in Nero's time, Romulus was destroyed by a supernova. Well, hasn't that gone on to become a massive part of Star Trek's narrative, ongoing narrative? But I'm sorry, I mean, even in grief, and you know, he's been here nearly 30 years, he's had time to cool off. That's, I think, my worry. If he was within the few hours of the supernova, you could explain away things done in the heat of passion. He's there 30 years, and he's been stewing in his hate, sure, But would you not warn the Romulans? Nero thinks himself this sort of avenging angel. He lost his wife and his unborn child. Nero didn't warn the Romulan people that barely 100 years later their sun is going to go nova. He could have given them a century's notice and decided not to. Now sorry Nero, but you're a bit of a gobshite. Over on the Enterprise, away from Nero, you've got the crew trying to decide what to do next. Spock is of the opinion, let's go meet with the rest of the fleet in the Laurentian system. And they're talking about black holes and everything, and we get, damn it man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist. Kirk sitting in the chair, Spock doesn't even miss a beat out of the chair. Up Kirk gets. I was going to down Spock saying, if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth, which is of course the quote from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And I was going to give it a down, and then I realized, hang on, that's not fair. If I'm given I'm a doctor, not a physicist, an up. And I was going to down it for like, oh, we're just lifting lines from other films. That doesn't make sense. In fairness, I shall give an up to the fact that even in this universe, Sherlock Holmes remains Spock's ancestor. And to address the comments that were left on the ups and downs for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, when I said the joke was that Sherlock Holmes was his ancestor, and people said, no, they were saying it was Arthur Conan Doyle. I am quoting Nicholas Meyer. You'll see our interview with him is live on the channel, and the joke was, it was a little kind of a cheeky wink and a nod that Nicholas Meyer is such a huge Sherlock Holmes fan and has written Sherlock Holmes novels. That was the gag. Kirk, who it was established that Kirk has genius level intellect. Well, if Nero's from the future, he knows what's going to happen. Kirk doesn't understand alternate timelines. That's a down. And now the next down surrounds Kirk, but it's not Kirk's fault. Down to Spock. Get him off my ship, and maroons him on Delta Vega? Sticks him in an escape pod, gives him a backpack, and alright, yeah, it's within walking-ish distance of a Federation outpost, but surely it came up on scanners that Delta Vega has dangerous indigenous animals? Put him in the brig, Spock. Those aforementioned alien creatures, they're enough. They looked badass. And also, we certainly hadn't seen aliens like this in Star Trek before. I know it's the closest to Hakonan eel in Voyager's basics. You know, certainly, like, I know Species 8472. I'm trying to think of it like, but just animals that are coming at you. Because, yeah, these are frightening. Run, Kirk, run. Leonard Nimoy. As if it wasn't going to be an up. Leonard Nimoy cements this film and cements the Kelvin timeline. I think it works. I really do. If you had to have one character carry the crossover and be the sort of crux of everything, have it be Spock and have Leonard Nimoy appear. Brilliant. Leonard Nimoy came out of retirement to do this film. He retired from acting back in 2000 to focus on photography. So this was a gift. This very possibly might not have happened. And to have such a crucial role, I think it's a bit longer. I'd say it's a couple of extended cameos. But because so much of the plot revolves around him, it feels like there's so much more of him in here. We get a couple of, long-ish scenes. This mind meld scene, which, that's the beauty of the Vulcan mind meld, is you can sort of get a lot of exposition through really quickly without having to sort of, okay, folks, we're going to stop the film, we're going to get out the old history book. And so that works for me. So I like how he convinces Kirk so quickly. Down, supernovas don't threaten a galaxy. That just doesn't make sense. I'm gonna give a down on behalf of Spock here. This Spock blames himself for not being able to save Romulus. Even as older as this Spock is, as more in touch with his emotions, I do think it's a logical down to think that Spock would blame himself for something like that. I feel that was we just needed a feeling in this scene. I don't think it makes sense that he would blame himself. Spock and McCoy on the Enterprise, however, young Spock, love their back. They're very good together. Quinto and Urban really bounce together really, really well. McCoy say, if you want to win the dirt, I've got the thing about, you don't put your main stallion out to pasture. And Spock comes back with, interesting metaphor as to use a stallion, it must first be broken. hey, in fairness, you know, green-blooded hobgoblin. Oh, it's just, how many TOS-isms can we cram into a scene? Let's go, let's go. Down on the planet, Simon Pegg taken up, Deep Roy as Keenser taken up. Love the scene, it's very silly. It is impersonation as opposed to straight acting, I would say. But that's fine to a point. It's fine to a point, and I think it works. I like the comedy of it. Down, if anything happens to that beagle, I will take your kneecaps. Look me in the eye and tell me if you see any uncertainty. Transwarp beaming? There is some issues with these films. So we introduced the idea of transwarp beaming in this film. It is a down, and you know, beaming from Delta Vega onto the Enterprise while it's away at work, warp even, that's a down. I'll leave it as a down there for this one because I'm going to discuss it probably in a bit more length when we're going through Into Darkness. Just before they beam away, Spock insists that Kirk must get an emotional response out of his younger self because Kirk needs to be in command of the Enterprise. And, you know, he says, you know, try and emotionally compromise him. And Kirk is like, you know, he's cold, he's unfeeling. You know, he's not emotionally compromised. And Nimoy just does this. Jim, I have just watched my home planet be destroyed. I am emotionally compromised. It is not just an up, but it's my Latinum up of the film. I mean, in a way, Nimoy overall is my Latinum up of the film, but this scene is just one of the absolute standouts. The way he delivers it, I feel it in my core. When we beam into the Budweiser brewery, by the way, that's what that was. I don't mind it, I think, because I don't mind a functional look in engineering. I wouldn't rank it high on my list of favorite engineerings, I won't lie to you, but I get it in the context of the film. But we beam in there and we get the gag of Scotty beams into the water tank and nearly dies, lol. They get brought to the bridge by Cupcake, and we get the scene trying to upset Spock. Here, I can say finally, no, Kirk is trying to be a prick. This is now an act. This scene is an up. And I must say, Quinto in this scene. I once had a conversation with someone that was, I've never forgotten it because I think it was around the time Into Darkness came out. And it was about how often in the Kelvin timeline, Spock shows emotion. One of the things that, you know, we think of Spock from the original series and beyond as, you know, on the surface, you would say, oh, coldly illogical and no feelings and everything. Obviously, we know better, but, you know, on the surface, you would say coldly logical and you know, never shows emotion. And when you have, I mean, at this point, it was, what, 40-ish, coming up on 50 years of history. Sure, we had plenty of examples of Spock showing emotion, but spread out over nearly 50 years of history. In the 3 Kelvin films, particularly the first, I'll say the first 2 Kelvin films, it seems like, you know, oh, an hour has gone by and Spock hasn't had an emotional breakdown. So why is Sean giving this scene an up, you might be asking as you look at your watches. Fair, bear with me. Here, it feels earned, it feels powerful, and seeing Spock lose control like this, in the context of this film, reminds you how young Spock is here. The loss he's just faced, and how it's only Sarek who's able to bring him out of it. And the exchange between himself and Sarek, where Sarek, in his own way, admits his pain by going, I married your mother because I loved her. This really, really works. Oh, I'm gonna have things to say about Into Darkness. Kirk is now in command. He signals to the rest of the ship that rather than going to meet the rest of the fleet, they're gonna go and take on the Narada. I mean, yeah, it's not like the other fleet was any use. So the Narada's now headed to Earth because Nero's insane. I think that's just the easiest way of looking at it. Nero's insane. That's why he does what he does. So the Enterprise is going to warp there and Spock comes back up. But at this stage, he says, I want to help. And pretty much we get our crew. So now we have everyone at least working toward the same goal. Spock does give the reason that, You know, his mother was from Earth. Earth is now the last home he has left. Up. That was an up. Because this is something that we all know to be fact, but nice to hear him say it. I did have to kind of question it a little bit. Now, revealing, well, we know that Romulans and Vulcans have a shared history, but for him to just be like, Romulans and Vulcans have a shared history, I might be able to decipher something on board the ship. Okay, I don't speak Italian and therefore probably couldn't read much of it. Just saying. As they're planning their arrival in our solar system, they discuss, you know, they're going to have to go aboard the Narada and rescue Captain Pike. Kirk says he's going to go. Spock says he will go as well. Kirk says, oh, I'm going to. I would cite regulation, but you would merely ignore it. Up. Now, one of the most gorgeous scenes in this film, up, rising up out of the clouds of Titan. Oh, I love that. That's a poster right there. It's beautiful. We also get the first on-screen confirmation of Uhura's first name here, Nyota Uhura. Yes, this was the first time it had been said on screen. It had been said back in novels from 1982 in the, you know, the Wrath of Khan, you know, talking about the crew on board that. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it had never been said on screen. Love it. Love it. Railings. Does health and safety mean nothing to the Romulans? No wonder your son exploded. I bet you were messing around with it. Look, the inside of the Narada, it looks like an insect hive. That itself, fine. But the fact that it makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, one of the reasons it makes no sense, one of the reasons that Eagle Moss never made a model of the Narada. Hot Wheels did though. If you have one of those models, show us a picture of it on social media, because I kind of like that one. Possibly controversial opinion, never liked the Kelvin phaser. I don't like the little swap around thingy. Now it's done, now it's kill. Is it not the same energy beam coming through? Anyway. Am I nitpicking? Maybe a little bit. Spock goes aboard the jellyfish, which is aboard the Narada, and I love that. Welcome back, Ambassador Spock. Kirk just goes, oh, that's weird. Love it. This is an up. You know, we have, you know, a 4.3% chance of survival. Listen, Star Trek has done more with less odds. This all of an up. There was an issue here, which has only really become an issue afterwards. In this film, the jellyfish is dated as being constructed in 2387. Picard would put the supernova back 2 years into 2385. That's not this film's fault. So it's like, oh, okay. Why use the supernova and then change the date of it? Anyway, my down here is called Nero's position. Why is Nero gloating about, oh, I knew, you know, I've seen your face in history. James T. Kirk was considered a great man, but that's in another life. Now I'm going to take your life the way I took your dad. Okay. What a weird thing to say. What I do like is, you know, Nero then jumps away because, you know, we've got Spock's aboard the jellyfish. He's distracting him. Meanwhile, this whole time, by the way, the drill is extended and it's firing down into San Francisco Bay. So, you know, you leave my Golden Gate Bridge alone. I like that bridge. But yeah, IL has Kirk by the throat. He's like, oh, your race is so weak, you can't even speak. And then Kirk just goes, what's that? I got your gun. Up. Spock aboard the jellyfish shoots his way out of the Narada. He then destroys the drill extending down from the Narada. Thank goodness, because I like Earth, I live there. Then he warps away, the Narada follows. Lisa takes the action away from Earth, which is good if any kind of matter was to ignite. And so they end up in a part of space that allows them to have a bit of a, well, not shootout, because the jellyfish isn't doing much firing at this point. The Narada fires everything at the jellyfish, which has turned and made a collision course with the Narada. Now remember, this very silly MacGuffin red matter is aboard the jellyfish. If it ignites, you've got a black hole. This is what happened on Vulcan. This was the plan to, you know, stop the supernova by sucking it all into a black hole, and would have been the plan to destroy Earth as well. I don't know about your starship, but my starship's not going to survive a black hole appearing in the middle of it. So I can understand why Nero's a bit concerned. You know, Kirk is over unstrapping Pike from the table. He's had that cerulean eel put down his throat. Doesn't look very nice, to be honest, at all. But yeah, Pike's still a bit of an action star by using Kirk's phaser to shoot some Romulans who are chasing them. I'm kind of enjoying all of that. As the jellyfish flies toward the Narada fires all the weapons, and we're, "Sir, there's another starship coming in." And the hairs are on end. Enterprise comes in firing. Oh God, I love this scene, I love the scene, I love the scene. I just love it. It's brilliant, I love it, it's brilliant. Yep, brilliant. Yeah, and just the music is soaring, the way the ship goes by. I love the phaser turrets. I love that design on this ship. It protects the jellyfish enough for the jellyfish to fly directly toward the Narada. Scotty does get a transporter lock. Drill's gone, so he gets Spock, he gets Pike, he gets Kirk out of there. The jellyfish impacts the Narada, and the red matter starts to ignite, creating a black hole. I do love the Scotty just going, "Hey, I've never beamed 3 people from 2 different places onto one platform before. That was pretty good." Yeah, right. That's an up. Give him that one. We then get the slightly controversial moment here, because Kirk finally, no, at this stage he's earned it. So Kirk is very commanding at this point, and he signals the Narada. Spock asks, "What are you doing?" And Kirk says, "You have to give them the opportunity. You have to offer them escape. You know, surely Spock, you would, you know, agree that, you know, this goes with regulations." And Spock just goes, "No, Captain, not this time." But Kirk does signal the Narada, and he says, "We are ready to provide assistance if you need." And Nero says, "I would rather suffer the death of Romulus 1,000 times. I'd rather die in agony." And Kirk just goes, "You got it, fire everything." And they do. They empty their phaser banks on the Narada, which destroys it and sucks all of the Romulans into a black hole. Oh crap, there's a black hole. Enterprise, start warping out of there. Why aren't we at warp? We are! This whole scene is an up. It's visually a treat. And look, if I'm gonna up, I'm a doctor, not a physicist. If I'm gonna up, if you eliminate the impossible, I have to up. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. Anyway, they detonate the warp core, away they go, flying away. Thank goodness. So they get back to Earth. And then we get the scene where Zachary Quinto and Leonard Nimoy share a conversation on Earth. It is my dilithium up of the film. For me, when you have a crossover like this, and I think another recent-ish example would be X-Men Days of Future Past, when you had James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart on screen together, you're sort of waiting for this moment, aren't you? And I think I am not our father. You know, as our customary farewell would seem oddly self-serving in this instance, I will simply wish you good luck. Yes, but you can be in 2 places at once. All of this is just chef's kiss of a scene. Down. Kirk hasn't completed the Academy, and yet he's given command of the Enterprise. I love the scene. I love Pike, looks great in his threads. By the way, do check out our uniforms ranked video, because we do give this one a shout out as well. But Kirk's still in school. However, he is there in command, finally wearing his uniform. Spock walks on and says, "I humbly submit myself as first officer. If needed, I can provide character references." Up. And of course, that beautiful last shot of the Enterprise about to go to warp, Leonard Nimoy delivering Space, the Final Frontier, into the wonderful, wonderful rendition of Alexander Courage's original series theme as recomposed by Michael Giacchino. Up. Would you kindly join me at the temporal observations? A film like this is funny because obviously it's a prequel, so there's going to be lots of, you know, references and nods and where we saw this before and that before. But really quickly, the overall theme of it, the Star Trek Starfleet Academy, and no, I'm not referencing the upcoming TV series, was an idea by Harv Bennett. So he produced Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, The Voyage Home. He appeared in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. But then relations between him and Paramount soured a little bit because his idea for Star Trek VI was an Academy-based movie that would follow Kirk and Spock meeting for the first time. I am, myself, I'm obviously glad that we got Undiscovered Country. It's possibly my favorite Star Trek film. And even if we had to wait a little bit longer, I was very, very, very glad that we got this film the way that we did. Rick Berman, who at this stage had nothing to do with the Star Trek franchise, he was interviewed before, but he credits Abrams for bringing this idea of a younger prequel cast together. So not that it's, you know, it wasn't that anyone was taking Harve Bennett's idea, it wasn't that someone was claiming credit for it, it was that it obviously just felt like this was the time to do this story. I'll have to give a shout out as well to J.J. Abrams as a director. Now, he was on the record as saying that he wasn't a Trekkie. I think it both shows in that it's not slavishly upholden to everything that we'd seen before, but I think also it honors everything that had come before as well. I mean, he got people around him who knew what Star Trek was. I vividly remember watching the first teaser trailer for this film, one frame of which, or one scene of which was directed by Abrams, the rest was by the assistant director. And it was just before the movie Cloverfield. I remember that was there with UCD Drama Society. We had gone to see Cloverfield as one of our outings, probably before going to the bar. And myself, you could spot the Trekkies, because myself and 3 others sitting in the back row of this pretty empty theater. It wasn't day one of Cloverfield or anything. This teaser comes on and you could see those of us just leaning forward. It was a banger of a teaser, as was the trailer. It was always just going to be called Star Trek. That was always the plan. It takes clear inspirations from The Wrath of Khan, Yesterday's Enterprise, Balance of Terror. Yesteryear from the animated series plays a big part of the inspiration for this. Also Journey to Babel in Sarek and Amanda's relationship as well. Roberto Orci went on the record pretty soon afterwards saying that yes, this film follows now an alternate timeline, but he said that it doesn't change anything in the prime time. He basically wanted to say, look, yes, we're doing our own thing, but don't assume that this has now changed history in the main one. And because of what we've now seen with things like Picard, Lower Decks, for example, yes, the 2 timelines have continued separately of each other. Do you know those lens flares were actually physical? So I interviewed Scott Chambliss, right, who was the production designer on this film, and he told me that he stood off camera with a flashlight, and that's how they achieved that. So whether you love or hate the lens flares, and believe me, I've seen a lot of people come down on either side, that was someone standing at the edge of a camera going, yep, more lens flare. We got a tribble on Delta Vega. As I've mentioned before, Leonard gave an interview about William Shatner possibly being in this film. I don't know, look, yeah, maybe there is an argument that it could have been fun. Basically, so the idea, if it was ever going to happen, it would have been during the scene with the 2 Spocks. Older Spock would say to younger Spock, don't take my word for it, and would show a recorded holographic message from William Shatner's Kirk saying, you know, we are best friends forever. But you would have had, there was like, Kirk was dead. So you might have to de-age him, or, you know, you might have to, basically making it work seemed more of a hassle for just involving it. So yes, he was not in it. At 1 hour, 45 minutes, 45 seconds, you'll hear a Romulan saying, sir, if you ignite the red matter, that's Wil Wheaton. So Wil Wheaton, he of Wesley Crusher fame, did record a whole bunch of the voices for the Romulans on the Narada, a lot of which were digitally altered so that you don't basically just hear Wil Wheaton voicing a lot of people. But at that moment, that is clearly the unaltered voice of Wil Wheaton. Greg Gunberg, who is the childhood friend of J.J. Abrams, was the voice of Kirk's uncle Frank over the phone. He replaced there was a deleted scene in which Brad William Henke played Frank in the film. But he's turned up again in Star Trek because he's, mates with J.J. Abrams, and also has turned up in the Star Wars film now because of that. Matt Damon was at one point approached for George Kirk. Adrian Brody was considered for Spock. Dominic Keating, yes, Malcolm Reed, auditioned for the part that would become Uncle Frank, and he's since joked saying they obviously didn't know who he was, because if he had got the part, that would have caused some historical headaches. We get a shot of Pike in the chair, of course. The Romulan relief effort, 2385. So as I say, that's a retroactive issue. So Picard has changed the date of the supernova. We get a reference to the Centaurian slug, which is a more than deliberate reference to the Seti Io and Rora Penthe. So there's a deleted scene in which Nero was a prisoner on Rora Penthe, and the Klingons did appear in this film. And actually, skipping down a little bit, there was a Klingon interrogator who was played by Victor Garber. Now, he would be, I think he's one of those actors, like, you'd know his face. We get Spock saying, "I have been and always shall be your friend." Greg Ellis, who played Engineer Olson, had previously appeared in Star Trek Deep Space Nine in What You Leave Behind as Akor, a Cardassian who survives the assault on Dominion headquarters. The bag that Kirk is wearing when he gets out of his escape pod has 1701D written on it. McCoy, there's a gag about, don't you say suffering is good for the soul? I never say that. That's a gag calling back to the original series episode, the Corbomite maneuver. Emotionally compromising the commander. Well, that's how Kirk gets command of the Enterprise back off a compromised Spock in the TOS episode, This Side of Paradise. Lieutenant Yor. So mine, and I think Chris's, one of our favorite additions to Star Trek Discovery's third season and the Temporal Wars is Lieutenant Yor, a Betelgeusian time agent who is said to come from 2379, but from a reality that was created when a Romulan mining ship went back in time. Yor would then turn up in the Otoy short film Unification as well. Love the look of Yor. I mentioned the deleted scene with Gala being the unwitting accomplice to Kirk in the Kobayashi Maru, that he would give her a letter that she had to open at exactly 3 p.m. the following day, which then uploaded a virus into the Kobayashi Maru computer. I'm very glad they cut that. I'm also glad they cut a scene of Kirk chasing to apologize the wrong Orion girl. Kirk comes across badly enough in this film. We didn't need that as well. Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman based the Kirk-Spock relationship on John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The Countdown comic was released in advance of this film. We get great stuff in there as well. Of course, we get things like the Enterprise F. We get things like B4, who, the memory transfer from Data from Star Trek Nemesis, that took. So, love that. Christopher Doohan, son of James Doohan, appears as a transporter technician in this film. Ryan T. Husk is one of the hosts on The Seventh Rule. We've had him on the channel a couple of times. He is a crew member on board the Enterprise. There is a Commander Mark Leonard as well in this film. Folks, I have, for a long time now, I've been a big fan of this film. It was definitely a departure. The pacing of everything went up to 11. It was, as I say, Star Trek, not a subtle film series. And going into Darkness, I think that's where they got a little bit too unsubtle, but I'll get into that when we discuss Into Darkness. For now, I want to say thank you so much to everyone for watching along. You are awesome, you are wonderful. We really appreciate the support that you show the channel. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us make videos like this and all of the other lists that you see on the channel as well. Please make sure that you like and share this video. That does so much help for the channel as well. Until I see you again, make sure that you look after yourself. Make sure that you live long and prosper, and I will see you soon.